The morning light crept slowly over Savannah, painting the city's old brick buildings in shades of gold and rose. In the quiet lull before the breakfast rush, Gloria's kitchen buzzed with the low hum of preparation. The scent of strong coffee, buttered grits, and warm biscuits curled through the air, comfort layered in aroma. Marla Jennings moved with quiet precision behind the counter, pouring coffee into carafes, folding napkins, checking orders. Her routine was flawless, almost rehearsed. She wore long sleeves despite the Georgia heat buttoned neatly at the wrist. A soft cotton scarf circled her neck. Everything about her appearance was modest, controlled. Still, the faint shimmer of scarring peeked out from beneath the sleeve when she reached for the higher shelf. No one asked. Most people didn't need to. They filled in the blanks on their own. The regulars knew her, at least the version she allowed them to see. To them, Marla was polite, quiet, efficient. She didn't complain, didn't gossip, didn't linger. She handled rudeness with grace, confusion with calm and chaos, with the steadiness of someone who had seen far worse. But she kept her stories tucked behind her eyes, locked in silence. It was easier that way. Safer. "Marla, you all right over there?" Gloria called from the back with a voice like blackstrap molasses, slow, thick, and just sweet enough to disarm most people. Always Marla answered, not looking up from the coffee station. Gloria came around the corner, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a strong woman with a soft heart she tried to hide. "You sure you didn't even flinch when Roy over at table 3 tried to send his eggs back 'cause they weren't looking spiritual enough?" Marla offered a faint smile. "I've seen more dramatic complaints." Gloria narrowed her eyes, sensing the deeper meaning. She never pressed, but she noticed everything. "Well, let me know when you need a minute. Or a month." Marla nodded once, then returned to her rhythm. She was good at this, blending into the noise, the smells, the slow roll of small-town mornings. But something in her chest had started to tighten again, a quiet warning she couldn't shake. Maybe it was the dreams returning, fragments of heat shouts, distant sirens. Maybe it was the new faces that had started appearing in the diner lately. The door chimed, pulling her attention to the entrance. 3 men walked in, their energy too loud for the space. Expensive watches, pressed linen shirts, designer shoes that had never touched real dirt. Outsiders. You could spot them a mile away in Savannah. Not rude, necessarily, just sharp-edged in a place that moved soft. "Table or counter?" Gloria asked from the register, already bracing herself. "We'll take a table," said the one in the center. Salt and pepper hair, clean shave eyes that scanned the room like it was an asset to be measured. He didn't smile. He calculated. Marla watched as they slid into the booth near the window. The man in the center, Royce, she caught from the credit card he handed over, barely looked at her when she approached. "I'll be your server this morning," she said, pen ready. Royce opened the menu, then glanced up at her for the first time. His eyes hovered not at her face, but at her wrist where the scar curved just beneath the fabric. He didn't react. Not yet. The younger man beside him, tan and overconfident, gave a tight chuckle. "We're not from around here. What's... Good people like the sweet potato pancakes," Marla said evenly. "And the peach preserves are made in-house." Royce closed the menu. "Coffee? Black? And whatever's freshest." She nodded and turned away, aware of their eyes still on her back. "She's got some stories," the younger man murmured. "Everyone does," Royce replied, distant. But something in his tone wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. Back at the counter, Walter Grady leaned on his elbows, nursing a cup of decaf and watching everything. He was retired, though no one knew from what exactly, and quiet as a graveyard shift. He came in every Tuesday and Thursday, always early, always alone. Today he was watching Royce. "Out-of-towners?" he asked, not looking at Marla. "Probably consultants," she said, keeping her tone even. They don't look like they're here for the grits. She allowed a small smirk. Guess we'll see. Royce's gaze followed her across the room. He said little during breakfast, but his eyes were restless, tracking her every move. Something about her unsettled him, not the scars, though they were impossible to ignore, but the way she carried herself. Calm, controlled, like someone used to command, used to danger. After they paid and left no thanks, no eye contact, Marla cleared their table in silence. Tucked beneath a napkin was a receipt with a generous tip and a sticky note. Just 2 words written in tight script unit tattoo. Her breath caught. It wasn't a question meant for strangers. It wasn't a coincidence. Later, back in the storage room, Marla stood still for a long moment. Her hands rested on the shelf knuckles white. They were never just here for breakfast. She rolled up her sleeve, slowly revealing the tattoo on her forearm, faded but intact. A small symbol, nothing dramatic, to most meaningless. But to the right eyes it was a signature. One that had once been sewn into uniforms painted on medkits, whispered over radios during triage. She closed her eyes and exhaled long and slow. Outside, the bells above the diner door jingled again. And something told her he'd be back. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The next morning, the light over Savannah was softer. Thick clouds rolling in, muting the gold tones of the rising sun. It was the kind of morning that wrapped the city in a hush, as if asking it to listen closely. Inside Gloria's kitchen, the rhythm of opening preparations continued as usual, but Marla felt a shift in the air before she even stepped through the back door. Gloria was already in the kitchen, stirring a pot of grits with a concentration that usually meant something was on her mind. She looked up as Marla walked, an expression unreadable. "You sleep?" Gloria asked, without turning away from the stove again. Marla paused. "Some?" Gloria didn't push. "Well, you got company again." Marla's stomach tightened. "Same men." Gloria gave a slight nod. "Table 6 this time. Brought their laptops. Might be making us their new headquarters." Marla let out a slow breath, adjusting the knot of her scarf. She didn't ask why they were back. She already knew it wasn't for the pancakes. When she walked out onto the floor, the scene looked almost identical to the day before. Royce Pembroke sat at the end of the booth, his fingers tented under his chin. Trent and Miles typed rapidly on their laptops, glancing up only occasionally. The casual corporate banter from yesterday had vanished. Royce watched her approach like he was waiting for something specific. Marla reached for her notepad. Coffee. Royce gave a single nod. "Please." "Same as yesterday," Trent added, without looking up. "Make mine 2 sugars this time." Marla noted it down without reacting. She turned to go when Royce's voice stopped her. "Miss Jennings, right?" She turned slowly, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "Yes." There was a pause, measured, tense. "I'd like to ask you something," he said, voice quiet but pointed. "If you have a moment?" Marla felt the pulse rise in her throat. "I'm on shift. It won't take long." She studied him for a beat, then gestured toward the corner where the refills were set up. "Over there." 2 minutes. When he followed, she turned her back slightly toward the table, filling a new pot of coffee to avoid the weight of his stare. Royce kept his voice low. "I recognized that ink yesterday. 1st Medical Battalion." "Iraq." She didn't answer right away. The room suddenly felt too warm. "I asked," he continued, "because I knew someone in that unit. Briefly, years ago." Marla poured slowly. "It's not something I usually talk about," I figured, he said. "You're not exactly hiding it, but you're not advertising either." She set the pot down. "And why would a man like you care?" Royce tilted his head. "A man like me, out-of-towner, executive, walks in like he owns the place, watches people like they're assets. Her tone stayed calm, but her eyes were sharp now. That kind of man. He didn't flinch. Maybe I used to be. The silence between them stretched longer than it should have for two strangers. Marla broke it first. "You're not here for the property." Royce's brow lifted slightly. "You came in yesterday with a plan," she said. "This morning you walked in like you're checking the perimeter. You know who I am. Or you're trying to." He looked almost impressed. "You're quick. I had to be." Royce hesitated. His next words came softer. "I was wrong to assume anything yesterday. I apologize if I crossed a line." Marla turned her attention back to the coffee. "The line's fine. Just don't mistake silence for weakness." He nodded, almost like he was absorbing something more than just her words. Noted. As she returned to the booth with their drinks, Walter had taken his seat at the counter, same as always. He gave her a long, curious glance as she passed eyes, asking a question he wouldn't say out loud. "Morning, Walter. You look like you got two trains running in your head," he said. She smiled faintly. "Maybe just one big one." He nodded, tapping a finger gently against his cup. "You ever need help switching tracks, you let me know." Meanwhile, Trent leaned toward Royce, whispering something just out of earshot. Royce didn't reply. He just stared down at the coffee in front of him, deep in thought. Across the room, Kayla wiped down menus and cast glances toward Marla every few minutes, curiosity burning in her expression. After the third pass, Marla walked over. "You got a question or just bored?" Kayla blushed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to stare. Just those guys. They're kind of intense. They're just people Marla said folding a menu. Same as anyone, but they act like you're not." Marla paused. That landed heavier than it should have. Kayla fumbled. "I mean, they look at you different. Like they know something. Or like they want something." "Maybe they do," Marla said softly. "Doesn't mean they'll get it." That afternoon, the clouds finally let loose a steady drizzle. The diner dimmed under the gray light windows, misting as locals came in for late lunches and coffee refills. Royce and his team lingered longer than expected. Laptops away now, they just sat talking in low tones. Marla cleared their plates without asking if they needed more. Royce looked up as she reached for his cup. "You ever think about leaving Savannah?" he asked suddenly. She froze for half a second. "No." "Why not?" She shrugged. "The world's noisy. Savannah's quiet." He tilted his head again, studying her like he was trying to solve something that didn't want to be solved. "You don't strike me as someone who needs quiet." Marla met his eyes, steady now. "That's exactly why I do." Royce didn't speak again. As they left, he looked back once, just a glance. It wasn't about her appearance, not her scars. It was something else, something more personal, more human. Marla stood behind the counter, wiping down a surface that was already clean, her mind far from the motions. Because for the first time in a long time, someone saw beneath the surface, and that was always the most dangerous kind of recognition. 2 days passed before Royce returned. The quiet was almost unsettling without him. Marla didn't want to admit it, not even to herself, but his absence left a strange echo in the diner. Not relief, not quite tension, just space. A space she didn't ask for but couldn't ignore. Gloria noticed it too. "You keep glancing at the door," she said, mid-morning, slicing peaches with military precision. "I'm not," Marla replied. "You are." Marla set down a clean stack of mugs. "I'd just like to know who's walking in." Gloria paused, knife hovering. "You ever let someone in?" "Marla like actually in?" Marla looked over her shoulder. The diner was half full. Kayla was chatting with a table of college kids. Walter nursed his coffee like always. Everything looked normal, but the words hit too close. "I let people order," Marla said quietly. "That's close enough." Gloria didn't respond. She just slid the peaches into a bowl, handed them off, and returned to her rhythm. But the question lingered. At noon, the door opened, and Marla's breath caught, not that she showed it. Royce walked in alone this time. No laptop bag, no entourage, no clipboard, just a dark jacket and a slower step. He scanned the room and nodded once when he met her eyes. "Just coffee?" she asked, as he took a seat at the counter. "For now." She poured without a word, set the mug in front of him, and returned to the other end of the counter to stock napkins. But the air shifted the moment he sat down. Kayla glanced over. Walter raised one eyebrow and went back to his crossword. Royce watched her as she worked, then said, "Do you ever get tired of being unreadable?" She turned her head slightly. "Do you ever get tired of asking questions you already know the answers to?" He smiled. It was subtle. Warmer than before. "You don't make it easy. I'm not trying to." He leaned back slightly, letting the steam from the cup drift between them. "I meant to ask, why a diner?" Marla paused. "Why not? You could be running a clinic, a nonprofit, speaking at conferences. I know what someone like you is capable of." Her jaw tightened, but only for a breath. People think capability has to look a certain way, loud, important, expensive. He didn't interrupt. "This place," she continued, "lets me be useful without being seen. That's enough for me." Royce stirred his coffee, thoughtful. "I think you've confused hiding with healing." The words landed with a quiet thud in her chest. Marla looked at him long and clear. "I think you're assuming you understand something that's not yours to understand." This time Royce looked away. Before the silence could turn sour, Gloria's voice cut across the kitchen. "Marla, back fridge isn't cooling again. Can you take a look?" Marla nodded and slipped into the kitchen, glad for the interruption. Royce stayed at the counter, staring into his cup like it held answers. Walter shifted beside him. "She doesn't owe you anything," he said, without looking up. Royce blinked. "Excuse me." Walter flipped the page of his crossword. "You keep coming in here like you're gonna unlock her like a vault. That woman's been through more than she shares. Let her be. I'm not trying to." "You're trying. Maybe not to hurt her. But you're trying to figure her out. And that's not always welcome." Royce turned fully toward him. "You know her," Walter finally looked up. "Better than you do." Royce nodded slowly. "Fair enough." In the kitchen, Marla leaned against the cooler door, hand resting lightly over her chest. Her pulse was steady, but her thoughts weren't. He wasn't wrong. She had been hiding. But healing that was trickier. Healing assumed you'd stopped hurting. She returned to the floor just as Royce stood to leave. "Thanks for the coffee," he said. Marla gave a small nod. "Any time." But he paused. "I was wondering, would you ever consider just coffee, off shift, no questions?" Her heart skipped. It would have been easy to say no, easier than most things. She looked at him, not the sharp edges or the tailored lines, but the tiredness behind his eyes. There was something in him that didn't fit the rest of the picture. Something frayed. Maybe she said, "If you're still around next week?" He smiled, not the smirk from before. Something softer. "I will be." As he walked out, Kayla appeared beside Marla, arms crossed. "So, is he a thing? Now?" Marla blinked. What you looked like two magnets trying not to touch. Marla let out a low breath. "He's persistent. Persistent's usually annoying. That felt like something else." Marla didn't answer. Instead, she watched the door close behind him. Walter caught her glance. "He's not the worst. But don't let charm fool you. It fades fast." "I know," she said. He took a sip. Just make sure if you let someone in, they know how to stay. Marla nodded once, then turned back to her station. The counter was clean. The coffee was fresh. The work never ended. But something had started, and she wasn't sure yet if it was a risk or a reckoning. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The storm came in slow, not with thunder or dramatic winds, but with that soft, eerie hush Savannah knew well. The sky grayed. The trees stood still. People lowered their voices without knowing why. Inside Gloria's kitchen, the usual buzz had quieted too. Customers lingered longer over their meals. Kayla hummed under her breath as she polished silverware. Walter had taken his usual place by the window book, unopened. Gaze turned toward the street like he was waiting for someone. Marla moved through the space with her usual calm, but the energy in her chest was shifting. Low hum. Unnamed tension. Like something was pressing against her ribs from the inside. Royce hadn't come in since that last conversation. 3 days. Not that she was counting. But she was. She stepped out back to grab an extra case of orange juice. The air was thick, heavy with that southern kind of stillness that meant rain wasn't asking permission. As she reached for the door, a familiar voice stopped her. "You always move like you're bracing for impact." She turned. Roy stood just outside the alley gate, no umbrella jacket draped over one shoulder. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd been walking a while. His smile was softer today. Less armor, more hesitation. "I could say the same about you," she replied. He stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance. Didn't want to make a scene inside. Figured I'd try the back door. Marla lifted a brow. "You're either bold or foolish." He gave a small laugh. "Maybe both." A pause stretched between them. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here," she said. "Same," he answered, "but I had something I needed to ask." Marla leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Ask." He hesitated. "That tattoo. I didn't just recognize the unit. I recognized your name." Her expression shifted just barely. The kind of change only someone watching closely would catch. "I was stationed overseas for 6 weeks. My company handled infrastructure logistics. Civilian side. One of the bases got hit. I remember the report afterward. Sergeant Marla Jennings, medical evac under fire, 12 lives saved." I never forgot the name. She stayed quiet. I remember thinking, he continued, voice lower now, whoever that woman is. "I hope she made it out. And I hope she found peace." Marla's breath caught in her throat. He didn't fill the silence this time. He let it sit. "I don't talk about that part of my life," she finally said. "Not because I'm ashamed, but because when people find out, they change. Suddenly I'm not Marla, the waitress. I'm Marla, the soldier, the survivor, the project." Royce nodded slowly. "I'm not here to change how I see you. I'm here because I already did." She tilted her head slightly. "And what do you see now?" His eyes didn't flinch. "Someone who's done more with her silence than most people do with a microphone." That one hit harder than she expected. She looked away, focusing on the rain starting to collect on the edge of the dumpster lid. "Don't romanticize it," she said. "I'm not some wounded mystery woman waiting to be solved." "I know," he said quietly. "That's not what this is." Another pause. Rain started tapping lightly on the awning above them. "I wasn't sure if I should come back," he admitted. "Part of me thought maybe I'd already pushed too far. That I should just walk away and leave you with the dignity you earned." "And the other part?" she asked. The other part kept wondering. What if she's not just surviving? What if she wants to live again? That silence turned electric. He looked down, a little embarrassed now. Maybe that's too much. Marla's voice was soft but steady. You know what people don't realize about survival. He looked up. It's not brave. Not really. It's habit. You learn to wake up every day and pretend you're okay because the alternative is falling apart. He nodded. But living, she continued, that's different. Living takes choice, effort, hope. And do you? He asked almost a whisper. Hope? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped back inside and held the door open. Come in before the rain gets worse. He blinked, surprised. You're inviting me in. I'm letting you sit, she corrected. Don't make it more than it is. He followed her in shaking water from his jacket, grateful but quiet. Back at the counter, Walter looked up as Royce took a stool across from him. The veteran's gaze was calm but alert. Marla returned behind the counter, poured 2 fresh cups of coffee, and set one in front of each man. You know, Walter said, breaking the quiet, I used to think quiet folks had the least to say. Royce glanced over, waiting. But now I think they're just waiting for someone worth talking to. Royce offered a small smile. Then I'm honored. You're being tested, Walter said plainly. Not by me. Not directly. But understand, she's earned her peace. Don't mistake her invitation for permission. I won't. Royce said, the weight in his voice sincere. Marla stood behind the counter, wiping already clean surfaces, her mind tangled in memory and possibility. Because something had shifted. Not just in the air or the timing, but in her. She wasn't bracing anymore. She was listening. And something about that scared her more than all the years she'd spent pretending not to feel. The rain had come and gone by morning, leaving the sidewalks glistening and the air thick with that humid southern weight. The kind that clung to your skin and made your clothes feel like secrets you hadn't asked to carry. Marla opened the diner, alone that day. Gloria was at a doctor's appointment. Kayla wouldn't be in until 9. It was just her, the soft clatter of dishes, and the low hum of the radio whispering old Sam Cooke through the speakers. She moved through the space with purpose, but her thoughts were anything but settled. Royce. It wasn't the coffee, or the way he leaned in when he talked. It wasn't even the quiet respect he'd finally started to show. It was the way he looked at her like he saw something, even she had stopped believing was there. And that unsettled her more than anything else. At 8:12, the bell over the door jingled. She didn't need to look up. You're early, she said, wiping her hands on a towel. Royce smiled, holding 2 paper cups from the fancy coffee place down the street. I figured the least I could do is bring you one. She hesitated, then took it. I don't like favors. Good thing it's not a favor, he said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. It's a peace offering. She raised an eyebrow. What am I supposed to be at war with you over? He leaned forward slightly. You tell me. She didn't answer. Instead, she took a slow sip. It was exactly how she liked it. Too exactly. You asked Kayla, she said, not a question. Royce didn't deny it. She said you like oat milk. And that you'll never ask for it because you think it's too expensive. Marla's lips pulled into something close to a smile. She talks too much. She talks because she likes you. That smile faded. People like me until they start asking questions. Then maybe I'll stop asking. She looked at him, eyes sharp. You won't. And he didn't pretend to argue. Before either could say more, Kayla burst through the door, soaked and breathless. I swear the universe is testing me. Bus was late, my umbrella broke, and then some guy tried to pitch me a pyramid scheme in the parking lot. Marla slid her a towel without a word. Royce nodded politely. Morning. Kayla blinked at him, then smirked at Marla. Oh, he's back. You didn't scare him off. Progress. Marla shot her a look. Go dry off before you catch something. As Kayla disappeared into the back, Royce leaned in. She's not wrong. Marla folded a clean rag. About what you could have scared me off. You didn't. You're still here. That doesn't mean you're staying. Royce's smile faded just slightly. Do you want me to? The question floated there, suspended in the air between them. Marla didn't answer, but she didn't tell him to leave. Walter arrived just after 9, his usual slow steps and familiar nod. He glanced between them, read the room in seconds, and took his usual seat by the window. You got that look again? He told Marla as she refilled his cup. What look? The one you used to wear before you left? The one that meant your head was somewhere your feet hadn't caught up to yet. She paused. It's nothing. Walter stirred his coffee. Nothing doesn't make a woman pause like that. Across the counter, Royce quietly pulled out a slim notebook. He flipped it open, hesitated, then slid it across to her. What's this proposal? Marla narrowed her eyes. I told you I'm not interested in business. It's not business. Not exactly. He turned the page. It's a community development pitch. Small business grants, local hires, vet support services. She froze. He tapped the page. This idea started because of you. Marla looked up, guarded. Why? Because I realized I've been building things my whole life for the wrong people. For shareholders, for investors, for people who don't need another thing. But this place... He glanced around the diner. There's something worth protecting here. Marla's throat tightened, but she masked it with a sip of coffee. I don't need you to fix anything, she said carefully. I know, he said. But maybe I want to help build something alongside someone who understands what survival really means. She set the cup down. You don't get to throw words like that around just because you've read my record. I'm not. I'm saying them because I've watched you. The way you walk into this place like it's armor. The way people look at you with both fear and reverence. And the way you pretend none of it touches you when I know it does. Marla turned her face away just slightly to keep him from seeing the flicker of emotion she couldn't quite hide. The bell over the door rang again. This time it wasn't a regular. A woman in a tailored dress phone in hand, sunglasses still on indoors. She scanned the room and walked straight to Royce. Mr. Pembroke, you're needed on the call with Simmons. He's not happy about the delay in Charleston. Royce stood slowly. I told them I needed today. It's urgent, the woman insisted, if you want the deal to stay on track. Marla stepped back, returning to her station. Royce looked at her once more before grabbing his notebook. I'll be back, he said. She didn't look up. You don't owe me that. I know, he said, voice quiet. But I want to. Then he followed the woman out into the heat, the door closing behind him with a softness that didn't match the storm beginning to build in Marla's chest. Walter watched her quietly. You all right? She wiped down the counter. I don't know what that was. Walter gave a slow nod. Sometimes the hardest part of healing is letting someone see you before you're finished. She didn't respond. But for the first time in a long time, she felt it. She wanted to be seen, even if it scared her to death. Royce didn't come back that day, or the next. By the third morning, Marla stopped pretending she wasn't waiting. She told herself it didn't matter, that men like him had their own orbit, busy, brief, always moving, that people with shiny shoes and expensive plans didn't stay long in places like Savannah. They visited. They observed. Then they left, unchanged. Still, every time the bell over the door rang, something in her chest leaned forward. By Friday, even Walter noticed. He'll come back, he said, not looking up from his crossword. Marla glanced over. You don't know that. I know how people look when they've already made the decision to return. She poured his refill. He has meetings, deals, Charleston drama. Walter smirked. And yet I'd bet my last piece of pecan pie he's more concerned with what's going on at this counter than what's happening in any boardroom. Marla tried to ignore the sting of truth in that. She wasn't used to being part of someone's decisions. She was used to being a footnote, a checkpoint on someone's timeline. Kayla breezed past carrying a tray of peach cobbler and sweet tea, giving Marla a knowing side-eye. "You keep staring at the door like it owes you money," she said. Marla sighed. "Do you two have some sort of observation club I should know about?" Kayla grinned. "Oh, we've been holding meetings for weeks." But before Marla could fire back, the door opened again. And this time it wasn't Royce. A woman stepped inside, tall, and composed her dark green suit too sharp for the laid-back southern morning. Her heels clicked against the tile, her expression unreadable. She glanced around the room once before approaching the counter. "Are you Marla Jennings?" Marla straightened slightly. "Yes." The woman extended a business card. "I'm Victoria Price. I work with Pembroke Holdings." The name hit like a pebble dropped into still water. Marla took the card, but didn't look down at it. "Is something wrong?" Victoria's tone was professional, but her gaze was quietly intense. "Mr. Pembroke asked me to speak with you. He's been called back to New York earlier than expected." Marla's stomach dropped, but her face didn't flinch. "I see. He wanted me to deliver this." Victoria pulled a small manila envelope from her bag and placed it on the counter. "And to say thank you for your time and your candor." Marla didn't touch the envelope. That all Victoria hesitated. "There's more, but I don't think it's my place." Marla met her eyes. "Say it anyway." Victoria exhaled. He changed the proposal, scrapped the corporate expansion. The grants, the veteran programs, the local hires, that's the new focus. He pitched it to the board this morning, against their advice. Marla blinked. Why, Victoria gave a small, almost reluctant smile. "He said you reminded him what integrity looks like, that sometimes the best deals aren't profitable." Just right. The diner was suddenly too quiet. Marla reached for the envelope, but she didn't open it. Not yet. Victoria softened just slightly. He also said he wanted to come in person. But he wasn't sure if that would help or just make it harder. Marla nodded more to herself than anyone else. "You've done your part." "Thank you." Victoria turned to leave, pausing at the door. "For what it's worth, I think you affected him more than he expected." Then she was gone. Walter watched her leave, and here I thought today would be boring. Marla stared down at the envelope. "What are you waiting for?" Walter asked gently. She opened it. Inside a single sheet of paper, not corporate stationery, just plain white, Royce's handwriting neat but rushed. "I don't know what to call what happened between us, but I know it was real. You changed my direction, Marla, not just in business, everywhere. If I never see you again, I'll still carry that with me. But if you want to know what it feels like to build something together, call me." Beneath that, a phone number, and one last line. No questions, just coffee, like we said. Marla folded the letter, slowly, hands steady, but heart racing. She didn't say anything for a long time. Walter cleared his throat. He left the door open. "I know." And she looked out the window, eyes distant but alive. "I'm still deciding whether to walk through it." Walter smiled behind his coffee. "That's the most alive I've seen you in years." She didn't answer, but in her silence, something shifted. Not just in the air, not just in her posture, but in her. Because maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop standing still. Marla didn't call him. Not that day, not the one after either. She kept the letter in the back pocket of her worn leather journal tucked behind old grocery lists and scribbled shifts. It wasn't that she didn't want to respond. It was that the feeling itself was unfamiliar. This steady pull toward someone who hadn't tried to fix her, hadn't demanded explanations, just offered space. That kind of offer didn't come around often, and when it did, it came with questions she wasn't sure she wanted to answer. Late Sunday afternoon, the diner was quiet. Rain had returned just enough to keep the tourists away and leave the regulars speaking in soft tones. Kayla had taken the day off. Walter wasn't in yet. Gloria had come in for 2 hours, then left with a sharp look at Marla and a note, "Rest doesn't mean you're weak." Marla had laughed at that. Then stayed anyway. She stood behind the counter drying clean mugs and watching water bead down the windows. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, composed. But inside the ache was growing something between longing and fear. It sat just beneath her ribs, whispering things she didn't want to hear. The bell above the door chimed. She didn't look up right away, assuming it was another familiar face. But the energy was different. Sharper. A pause in the room that felt like a skipped heartbeat. "Excuse me," a woman's voice said. Marla turned. The woman was in her 40s, expensive bag, on one arm, sunglasses resting atop sleek hair that had been perfectly styled for humidity. She looked like she belonged in a boardroom, not a booth. "Can I help you?" Marla asked, tone polite but cautious. The woman offered a tight smile. "You're Marla. I thought so." Marla nodded once slowly. "I am. I'm Claire." Marla waited. Claire Pembroke. The pause hit harder than expected. Royce's ex-wife. Marla didn't move, didn't blink. She simply set the mug down with quiet care. Claire gestured toward the booth by the window. "Do you have a moment I'd rather not talk standing up?" Marla studied her. "That depends on why you're here." "I'm not here to cause problems," Claire said quickly. "And I'm not here to fight over a man." Marla's jaw clenched slightly, but she nodded once. 5 minutes. They sat. The booth felt smaller than usual. The rain outside softened, but the air inside the diner had thickened. "I'll get to the point," Claire said. "Royce and we haven't been together in over 2 years. We're still tied through business, of course, but the rest unraveled a long time ago." Marla stayed quiet. "He's different now," Claire said, glancing out the window. "At least that's what everyone keeps saying." Softer, more grounded. Her voice lowered. "That started after Savannah." Marla folded her hands in her lap. "He's a grown man. He makes his own choices." Claire's gaze was sharp now. "He does. And he's choosing you." Marla blinked but said nothing. Claire leaned in just a touch. "I came here because I wanted to know why." Marla tilted her head. "And what did you think you'd find I don't know? A story? A warning sign? Something that would make this make sense?" Marla exhaled through her nose, calm but firm. "I'm not interested in proving anything to anyone, especially not to the woman who used to share his last name." Claire nodded slowly, a faint flush coloring her cheeks. "That's fair." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't beg to be filled. "I didn't expect to like you," Claire admitted, softer now. "But you're not what I imagined?" Marla leaned back slightly. "You imagined someone who needed him." Claire looked at her, then laughed quietly. "Exactly." Marla's eyes didn't leave hers. "I don't. But that doesn't mean I don't want something." Claire studied her again, this time with something close to respect. "You're not the type of woman who needs anyone's permission, are you?" "No," Marla said simply. "And you didn't need to fly down here to give it." Claire gave a small nod, then reached into her purse. She pulled out a business card, scribbled something on the back, and slid it across the table. I'm not your enemy. And for what it's worth, if Royce finds something real, something that softens that edge of his, I want him to keep it. Marla stared at the card, but didn't touch it. I still don't understand why you came, she said finally. Claire's voice was quiet. Because he was mine for 10 years, and I never saw that version of him. And I needed to know if it was real or if he was just pretending for you. Marla's expression didn't shift. And Claire stood, smoothed her jacket. It's real. With that, she left. The bell above the door echoed for longer than usual. Marla sat still for a long time, the card sitting between her fingers unread. Walter arrived not long after. He paused when he saw her face. You look like someone just shook the table before the puzzle was finished. Marla gave him a tired smile. Someone did. He sat slowly, letting out a quiet sigh. You want to talk about it? No. You want to be asked again tomorrow? Maybe, Walter nodded. Then I'll ask. Later that night, after the diner was locked and the chairs were flipped and the street was empty, Marla stood in the darkened kitchen with her phone in her hand. She looked at Royce's number, then looked away, then back, and finally, with a breath that trembled just slightly at the edges, she pressed call. The call rang twice, then 3 times. Then, Marla, his voice, immediate, grounded, like he hadn't dared to hope but had been waiting anyway. She didn't respond right away. Her breath had caught the moment he said her name. Something about hearing it spoken through the quiet of her kitchen at night made everything feel a little too real. I thought maybe you changed your number, he said softly. I thought about it, she replied, not bothering to hide the truth. A small chuckle from his end. I deserved that. There was a long pause, the kind that was more full than empty. I got your note, she said finally. I meant every word. I believe you. Her voice was level, but the tightness in her chest hadn't let go yet. You left fast. I had to, he said, but I hated how it felt. You sent your assistant. Victoria's not just my assistant. She's someone I trust to tell the truth when I can't. Marla sat down at the kitchen table, letting the chair creak beneath her. She told me about the board, the changes. He didn't speak. You're really doing it? She asked. I already did, he said. They pushed back, said it wasn't scalable, said it didn't fit the brand. I told them that was the point. She let out a slow breath. You blew up your own deal. No, he said. I redirected it. Toward something better. Because of me. Partly, he admitted, because I finally saw how empty it all felt. How much I was building things for people who'd never set foot in a place like Gloria's. She closed her eyes. The quiet wrapped around her like warm linen. You didn't have to explain, she said. I wanted to. Another pause. This one gentler. I didn't expect Claire to show up, he added, voice heavier now. I figured you didn't send her. No. But I'm not surprised. She always needed to close every door behind her. Marla tapped a finger gently on the edge of the table. She didn't say anything bad. She just wanted to see. Royce exhaled slowly. I was hers for a long time, but she never asked who I wanted to be. You did. I didn't ask, Marla said. I just didn't pretend to know. He laughed softly. Exactly. They let the silence stretch again. You free tomorrow? He asked, a little tentative. I work. After she considered. Maybe. He hesitated. There's a place I'd like to take you. It's not fancy, but it's real. And quiet. That sounds like something you Googled. I grew up in South Carolina. Remember, I know where the crickets sing loud and the sweet tea tastes like syrup. Marla smiled despite herself. All right. Pick me up at 7. I'll be there. She ended the call without goodbye. Let the line fall silent with something unsaid, but understood. The next evening he pulled up in a dark gray truck. Nothing flashy. Clean but not spotless. Marla noticed that right away. He got out no suit jacket this time. Just a button-down rolled at the sleeves and jeans that didn't look like they belonged to someone who made million-dollar calls. "You're on time," she said as she walked toward him, arms crossed. "I practiced," he replied. "Twice." She shook her head, but her smile lingered. They drove for 30 minutes in near silence. Not because they didn't have anything to say, but because neither of them wanted to rush the space between. Finally, they turned down a gravel road that opened into a wide clearing beside a small riverbank. No lights, no music, just the sound of water moving and leaves rustling in the breeze. Royce parked and got out, walked around to open her door. "You're trying too hard," she said. "I'm trying exactly the right amount," he replied. They walked together toward a weathered wooden bench. Royce carried a small canvas bag and pulled out 2 sandwiches wrapped in paper, a mason jar of tea, and 2 metal tumblers. Marla blinked. "You packed a picnic, I told you. I meant every word." She sat slowly surprised at the gentleness of it all. "This is where I come, when I need to remember I'm still human," he said, sitting beside her. She sipped the tea. "You don't strike me as someone who forgets." "You'd be surprised," he said, staring at the water. "When you're always building, it's easy to lose the parts of you that don't look profitable." Marla looked at him. "You're different." He turned toward her. "So are you." "I'm not sure if that's a compliment." "It is," he said, watching her carefully. "You made me stop running." She looked away. "I'm still learning how to stop hiding." "That's okay," he said quietly. "I'll wait." They sat for a long time, the sun dipping low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the clearing. And in the hush between day and night, in that space where things either end or begin, Marla reached for his hand. Just once. And he didn't move, didn't push, didn't speak. He simply held on. The next morning, Marla woke up before her alarm. It wasn't nerves exactly, it was something quieter, a kind of still awareness that settled into her bones like her body knew before her mind did something had changed. She lay there for a moment in the quiet eyes on the pale ceiling, listening to the hum of the old fan above her bed. Her fingers still remembered the shape of Royce's hand, the calm of it, how it didn't pull or press, just held. That bench by the river had felt like another world, one where nothing rushed, where no one asked her to explain her past or prove her worth, where for the first time in a long time the weight on her shoulders had eased just a little. Still, now that she was home in the 4 walls that held both her solitude and her survival, doubt was already knocking. She got up, moving through her small apartment like clockwork. Shower, coffee, journal open on the kitchen table, though she didn't write a word. She just sat, fingers drumming lightly, thoughts cycling. What was this? It wasn't a relationship. Not yet. But it wasn't casual either, wasn't. Royce wasn't playing. That much was clear. And she couldn't lie. She didn't want to pretend either. When she arrived at the diner, Gloria was already there, arms crossed, leaning against the counter like she'd been waiting for her. "You look different," she said. Marla paused in the doorway. "Good morning to you, too." Gloria smirked. "I've seen you after a 9-hour shift on your feet. I've seen you after 5 hours of kitchen plumbing disasters. I've never seen you look like this." Marla raised a brow. "Like what? Like someone who didn't sleep alone?" Marla let out a soft snort and walked past her. "We sat by a river. 8 sandwiches, that's it." Gloria followed. "And you're glowing from a ham and cheese on wheat." Marla didn't answer. Gloria leaned in. "I'm just saying, you're allowed to have things that feel good. You don't always have to pay penance to the past." That stopped Marla in her tracks. She turned. "You think that's what I'm doing? I think—" Gloria said, her voice gentle. "Now you've been punishing yourself for surviving." Marla looked away, throat tight. "That's not what it is." "Then what is it?" Marla didn't have an answer. Walter arrived 10 minutes later, his steps slower than usual, brow furrowed. "Everything okay?" she asked, pouring his coffee. He nodded vaguely but didn't open his crossword. Just stared out the window, hands wrapped around the warm mug. "You sure he cleared his throat? Heard from an old buddy last night, from the unit." Marla's posture shifted slightly. "Yeah, he's not doing well," Walter said, voice rough. "PTSD's eating him alive. Doesn't leave the house. Can't hold a job." "I'm sorry." Walter looked at her, then eyes sharper than usual. "He asked about you." Marla froze. He saw the article. What article? Local business magazine. Small feature on Pembroke Holdings' shift in direction. They mentioned you by name. Said the change was inspired by a veteran who now works at a small diner in Savannah. She closed her eyes. "Royce didn't ask me if he could do that." "No," Walter said, but he didn't say anything untrue. "It's not about that." "I know." Silence settled. "I don't want to be a symbol," she said quietly. "I just want to be a person." Walter nodded. "But sometimes the symbol helps other people breathe." She didn't know what to say to that. That afternoon, Kayla burst into the kitchen, cheeks flushed, phone in hand. "Marla, you're trending." Marla blinked. "What? Well, not you exactly." "But the story, it got picked up by a bigger blog. There's a whole thread online about how you inspired a billionaire to shift towards social impact." Marla felt her stomach twist. "People are sharing it everywhere," Kayla added. "Veterans, non-profit folks, small business owners. Somebody even started a hashtag." "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," Kayla said more carefully now, "but it's happening." By evening, Marla stood behind the counter with her phone buzzing every 10 minutes. Texts, emails, a voicemail from a reporter, 3 from other vets she hadn't heard from in years. She felt like she was standing under a spotlight she never asked for. At closing time, Royce walked in. He looked tired, rumpled, less like the polished man she'd first met, and more like someone who'd had to navigate a wildfire he accidentally started. "I'm sorry," he said before she even spoke. "For what?" "For not warning you. For letting your name be used before you gave permission. You said you meant every word," she replied, voice calm but cold. "I did. But that doesn't mean I had the right to speak them out loud." Marla looked at him for a long moment. "I wanted something quiet," she said. "Something that belonged just to us, not a headline." "I know," he said. "But maybe what you gave me was never meant to stay small. I'm not looking for attention. I'm not asking you to stand in the spotlight," Royce said gently. "I'm just asking you not to run from it." She looked down, heart thudding hard beneath her ribs. "This story, your story, it's already helping people," he added. "I can't take that back. But I can make sure you're not alone in it." She looked up then, eyes steady. "Can you—" He didn't blink. "Yes." She exhaled slow and deep. "Then you need to understand something," she said. "If we keep walking down this road, I can't promise to be soft, or open, or ready. Some days I'll pull away. Some days I won't have the words. I'll be there anyway," he said, "even on the quiet days." She studied him, her guard not fully down, but the door cracked open again. "I guess," she said slowly, "we'll see what kind of story this turns out to be." Royce smiled, quiet and certain. "So far," he said, "it's the only one I've ever wanted to stay in." The following week passed in strange layers, quiet, then loud, then quiet again. People came in asking questions, some polite, some too curious. A few veterans showed up just to see her face. One woman sat in silence with a coffee for an hour, then left a folded note on the counter that simply said, "Thank you for surviving." Marla kept her head down and her sleeves long. But something was shifting. She could feel it. The diner still smelled like fresh biscuits and burned toast at the edges. The coffee still poured in rhythms. Kayla still danced through her shifts like a breeze. But people watched her differently now, like they knew more than she wanted them to. And yet, she didn't hate it. Royce showed up every other day, never unannounced, never empty-handed. He brought peach pies from places she hadn't heard of, little drawings from his niece, a dog-eared book he swore reminded him of her. Each offering was quiet. No grand gestures, just presence. On Friday night, the diner was already closed when he knocked at the back door. Marla was wiping down Counter's music, low lights half-dimmed. She opened the door, eyebrows raised. "You lost, sort of," he said, holding up a small paper bag. "But I come bearing banana pudding, Southern approved." She stepped aside just enough to let him in. He leaned on the counter while she rinsed a rag. "Thought you might want some company." She didn't respond at first, just kept her back to him as she wrung out the towel. "Then tomorrow makes 10 years. He straightened slightly. "Since my last deployment, the day we came home." Royce stayed quiet, sensing the weight in her voice. Marla turned around, her eyes not as guarded as usual. "I never really marked the date before. Just kept moving. But this year I can't stop thinking about it." He didn't interrupt. "I remember the sand in my boots, the flight back, the way the air smelled different when we landed. I remember thinking it was over." Her voice wavered slightly. But it wasn't. "Not really." Royce nodded slowly. "No one talks about the after. Everyone thinks coming home is the finish line. It's not." He set the pudding on the counter. "Then let's mark it. However you want." Marla shook her head gently. "I don't do ceremonies. Not talking about ceremonies," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small black patch. Worn, frayed at the edges, embroidered with a white hawk. Marla froze. It was the insignia of her unit. Royce saw her expression and spoke carefully. "I know someone who served with you. A man named Luis Harper. He lives in Asheville now. Told me he still carries this with him." Marla's voice dropped. "Luis was one of the only ones who wrote after. He said you saved his life." Her throat closed up. Royce stepped closer, setting the patch gently on the counter between them. "He gave this to me. Asked me to return it to you if I ever got the chance." Marla stared at it. So small. So simple. But it hit harder than anything else could have. "I didn't expect that," she whispered. Royce's voice softened. "I think he hoped it would remind you of who you are outside of survival." She nodded slowly. "I still don't know what that is." "You don't have to yet," he said. "But I'll be here while you figure it out." Her eyes met his, and something shifted in her chest, like a door creaked open after years of rust. She reached out, fingers brushing the patch. Then she picked it up, pressed it flat against her palm and held it there like a heartbeat. "I haven't thought about that day in a long time," she said quietly. Royce stepped beside her. "Tell me." She hesitated. Then, for the first time in 10 years, she did. She told him about the dust and the heat and the night the convoy was ambushed, not with gunfire, but with fear. How it wasn't the chaos that haunted her, but the silence after. The stillness where nothing made sense. The way she had to keep everyone calm while something inside her shattered. She told him about the friend who didn't make it, the letter she never sent to his mother, the guilt that never left even though everyone said it wasn't her fault. Royce listened. Not just politely, but fully. completely, like her words were precious, not broken. When she finally stopped, the diner was dark and silent. The world outside pressed against the windows, but inside everything felt still. She looked at him, eyes glistening. "I don't cry." He didn't reach for her, didn't offer comfort she hadn't asked for. He just said, "You don't have to." But she did anyway, not loud, not messy, just 2 tears falling quiet and sure. And then she breathed. Not the kind of breath that kept her standing, but the kind that finally let her rest. Royce looked at her with something close to reverence. "You're the bravest person I've ever met," he said. "I'm just tired," she replied. He nodded. "Then maybe it's time someone else carried some of that weight with you." She leaned against the counter, the patch still in her palm, and for the first time in a decade, she let someone stand beside her in the dark. The next morning, the sky over Savannah was the color of unspoken thoughts, gray and heavy, like something was about to fall. Marla stood behind the counter at the diner, pouring coffee she didn't remember brewing, her body going through the motions, while her mind stayed somewhere else entirely. The patch was still in her pocket. Every time she touched it, her fingers trembled just a little. Not out of fear, but memory. And wait. Royce hadn't called or texted since he left the night before, and she hadn't reached out either. It wasn't avoidance, it was breath. A shared pause. Like both of them knew the next thing had to be real. Walter came in just after 8, same as always, wearing that old, weather-beaten cap that never quite matched his pressed shirt. He sat down slow, like the floor might shift beneath him. "You look like a woman who's been standing still for too long," he said. Marla poured his coffee without speaking. He sipped, waited. Then, "You ever feel like your story's changing, but no one gave you the new script?" Marla blinked. That was too close. "I don't know what to do with this," she said. "With what?" She hesitated. "Someone who sees all the pieces and doesn't flinch." Walter leaned back in his chair. "That's the part no one prepares you for, when someone stays after they know." "I don't know if I believe it yet." "You will. Eventually." She nodded slowly. But before she could answer, Kayla burst through the swinging door from the back, her phone in hand, eyes wide. "Marla, you need to see this." Marla looked up, brow furrowed. "What now?" Kayla turned the phone toward her. A video was playing. At first it was shaky, a clip filmed at some veterans event in Charleston. But then the camera panned to a speaker standing at a small podium. Royce. No suit, no entourage, just him speaking into a mic with wind in his hair and determination in his voice. Marla turned up the volume. "And when we talk about service," he was saying, "we talk about courage on the battlefield. But we don't talk enough about what happens when that battlefield follows you home. We don't talk about what it takes to rebuild yourself in silence, in kitchens, in diners, in everyday moments that no one claps for." The crowd was still. Royce's voice didn't shake. It deepened. "I met someone who reminded me of what honor looks like when no one's watching. A woman who has lived quietly with a strength that most men would never survive. And it made me ask myself who I wanted to be, not just in business, but as a man." He paused. "Marla Jennings. You changed me." Marla's breath caught. The diner seemed to go silent around her. "This isn't about publicity or redemption. This is about naming what matters. So today, I'm announcing the Pembroke Veteran Initiative, a national grant program for veterans transitioning into civilian life. Named not after a company or a CEO, but after the woman who showed me what service really looks like." The video ended. Marla stared at the phone, not blinking. Kayla's voice was hushed. "He named it after you." Marla nodded slowly. He didn't tell me. Walter cleared his throat. Probably figured you'd try to talk him out of it. She let out a long, uneven breath. This isn't what I wanted, she whispered. No, Walter said gently. But maybe it's what someone else needs. An hour later, the front door chimed again, and Royce walked in. Marla looked up, still behind the counter, but she didn't move. He came to her slowly. No speech, no grand gestures. Just him, hands in his pockets, eyes steady. I should have told you, he said. About the speech. The program. Yes, she said. You should have. I didn't want you to feel exposed. She studied him. I already feel that, every day. Royce exhaled. Then I made it worse. Marla didn't answer. He stepped closer. But I also wanted people to see what I saw. Not for your sake, for theirs. Because someone out there needs a reason to keep going. And maybe hearing your name gives them one. Silence wrapped around them. Finally, she said, You said once that you weren't trying to fix me. I'm not. But this feels like a rescue. No, he said, voice firm now. You rescued me. I'm just trying to honor that. Her eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. It's too much. Then tell me where the line is, he said. I'll move it. She looked at him for a long time. And then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the patch. This, she said, placing it in his hand, was all I had left of who I was. Royce looked down at it, then back at her, and now Marla stepped around the counter. Closer. Face to face. Now, I'm remembering who I still am. Royce didn't speak. She touched his hand gently. And maybe you're part of that. He swallowed hard emotion flickering behind his eyes. I want to be. A beat passed, then another. And then quietly, but with no hesitation, Marla said, So let's stop dancing around it. Royce's brow furrowed. Around what, her voice barely above a whisper. Whatever this is. She looked up at him, her voice steady, firm. I don't want to be saved. I want to be seen. Fully. Scars and all. He smiled. I already do. Then finally she let herself believe it. Marla stood in the center of her kitchen that night, barefoot, holding a chipped coffee mug she wasn't drinking from. The house was still, but her thoughts weren't. Royce's words echoed over and over in her mind, like waves pressing against a shore, never forceful, just steady, persistent. I already do. She hadn't let herself fully believe anyone could mean that. Not after the years of silence. Not after the way people flinched or looked away or offered pity disguised as kindness. But today, when he said it, she had believed him. Not because he made promises, but because he didn't try to rewrite anything. He saw all of her, and instead of turning away, he'd stood right there. That was scarier than anything she'd faced in the dark. She set the mug down and pulled her old journal from the shelf above the sink. Not the one with to-do lists and grocery notes. The other one, the one with letters she never sent. Thoughts she couldn't speak. It was where she had written the names of the ones she lost. Where she sketched the outline of the tattoo she carried on her shoulder, the one Royce had noticed without asking. She flipped to the last page, took a breath, and wrote, Maybe I am more than what I've carried. The ink bled a little. Her hand trembled. But she didn't stop. The next morning the air had shifted. The kind of crispness that meant spring had finally won the war against the tail end of winter. The city smelled faintly of jasmine and wet concrete. Marla walked to the diner instead of driving. The sun filtered through the Spanish moss hanging from the trees, painting gold across the sidewalk. Her body moved like it remembered how to walk without bracing for something. When she arrived, there was a crowd outside the diner. Not a mob, not reporters, just people, regulars, strangers, A group of veterans in matching jackets, a mother with a toddler on her hip, a high school teacher Marla hadn't seen in years. Kayla stood at the door, eyes wide, trying to make sense of it all. "What's going on?" Marla asked, walking up unsure whether to be nervous or touched. Kayla stepped aside. "They're here for you." "What?" Walter's voice came from behind the crowd. "You started something, Jennings?" He stepped forward, holding up a piece of laminated paper. Local paper ran a front-page story on the grant. "Your name's right there. And people, they wanted to thank you." Marla blinked. "Why would they thank me?" Walter looked at her like she'd missed something obvious. Because for the first time, someone who's been through it, who didn't come back with medals or parades, got seen. And it gave the rest of us permission to speak. She stood frozen as one of the veterans stepped forward. He looked to be in his 60s, beard peppered with gray. He removed his cap. "My daughter served. She hasn't spoken much since, but last night she showed me your story, said, 'If she can say it out loud, maybe I can too.'" Marla's throat tightened. Behind him, another woman stepped forward. "My son didn't make it back. But reading your words, it made me feel like someone still remembers what that means." The crowd wasn't loud. They didn't chant. They didn't shout. They just stood there offering quiet presence. And for someone like Marla, that meant everything. Inside, Gloria had already started brewing coffee. She raised a brow when Marla walked in. "You gonna stand there or help me feed these people?" Marla gave a soft laugh. "Right." The diner filled. Booths packed with folks who ordered coffee they didn't drink just to sit and be part of something. Veterans told stories they'd never shared. Strangers cried quietly over pancakes. There was something sacred in the room. Not religious, not performative, just human. And somewhere in the back booth, Royce sat watching it all unfold. He didn't insert himself, didn't try to claim a piece of the spotlight. When Marla finally sat down across from him, he just smiled. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "No, but also yes." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me the truth. What are you thinking right now?" She looked around. The crowd, the comfort, the ache. "I think," she said slowly, "that maybe my scars aren't the worst part of me. Maybe they're the beginning." Royce didn't speak. He reached across the table not to hold her hand, but just to be there. Marla took a breath. "I never thought my life would matter in a public way. It always mattered," he said. Now more people know why. The clatter of forks and the murmur of stories filled the diner. Marla sat back and let it wash over her. Not just noise, but healing in pieces. She wasn't just the woman people stared at anymore. She wasn't just the vet with a tattoo and a shadowed past. She was someone who had spoken, and others had answered. And right then in that booth with Royce across from her, and a diner full of people carrying their own unspoken stories, Marla realized. She wasn't just surviving. She was beginning. By the time Monday rolled around, the crowd had quieted, but the story hadn't. Marla's phone had started ringing in the early hours, calls from veteran groups, podcast hosts, even a small university asking if she might consider speaking to a group of students. She hadn't said yes. But she hadn't said no either. The patch stayed in her pocket every day now. Not as a crutch, but a reminder. A reminder that her story wasn't over. That morning she was standing in the diner's back hallway, apron half-tied, when Royce walked in through the rear entrance holding a coffee with her name scrawled across the side in black marker. "Did you forget I work here and have access to unlimited caffeine?" she asked, smirking. He handed her the cup anyway. "Yeah, but you don't have time to drink it, so technically I'm saving your life." She laughed quietly. So dramatic. He leaned against the wall, watching her for a moment. "You look tired." I am, she admitted, but not the bad kind. It's like my soul's tired, but in a good way, like I actually did something that mattered. You did. Marla took a sip, letting the warmth settle her nerves. Then Royce spoke again. I've been thinking about Charleston. She looked at him curious. The event, us, a weekend away. No cameras, no questions, just space. For you, for us. Marla hesitated. Charleston's a lot. I know, but I think we've earned something soft. She smiled slowly. That sounds terrifying. Soft things usually are. Just then, Gloria popped her head out from the kitchen. If you two are going to flirt in the hallway, at least pretend to be working. Marla waved her off with a small laugh. Royce leaned closer, voice lowered. Is that a yes? She tilted her head. I'll think about it. That evening, after the final customer left and the lights dimmed to their usual soft hum, Marla sat at her usual booth with Walter. He looked more tired than usual, Kane resting against the seat beside him, his cup half full and untouched. You okay? She asked. Walter nodded slowly. Just feeling the years tonight. She studied him. It's been a lot lately. He chuckled, but it came out hoarse. You ever think about how strange it is that survival's the hardest thing, but no one teaches you how to carry it all the time? Walter leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. I spent 30 years thinking if I kept my head down, I'd forget. But it doesn't work like that. No, she said. It doesn't. I saw you speak to that young vet yesterday, the one with the stutter and the service dog. He couldn't even look people in the eye when he walked in. Marla remembered. She'd sat with him for nearly 40 minutes, just sharing her coffee in silence. He left smiling, Walter said. You gave him that? She shifted in her seat, uneasy with the praise. I didn't do much. You did everything he said. You showed him he wasn't broken. That's the thing, kid. Some of us don't need to be told how to fight. We need to be told we're allowed to stop. The words settled heavy between them. After Walter left, Marla sat alone at the booth. She reached into her pocket, touched the patch. She thought about Charleston, about the ocean, about the idea of letting herself rest, really rest. Could she? Would it all fall apart if she stepped away from the diner, from the role she didn't ask for, but had somehow filled? She stood, slowly flipped off the main lights, and grabbed her keys. The night air was still warm, thick with the hum of the city winding down. She started walking nowhere in particular, letting her thoughts move ahead of her. 15 minutes later, she found herself outside Royce's place. She hadn't meant to go. Her feet had just taken her there. The porch light was on, soft yellow spilling over the steps. She hesitated for only a second, then knocked. He answered almost immediately, barefoot, holding a book glasses halfway down his nose. She smiled. You really are a walking contradiction. I like to keep you on your toes. I was thinking, she said, hands in her jacket pockets. Maybe I do want soft. He stepped aside, opened the door wide. Then come in, he said. No questions, no pressure. Marla hesitated just long enough to feel the pull in her chest, then walked through the door. Inside, it smelled like cedar and faint cologne. The house was quiet, warm, lived in. She sat on the couch while he poured her a glass of tea. As he handed it to her, their fingers brushed. She didn't pull away. They sat in silence for a few minutes, letting it settle around them. Finally, she said, I think I'm scared of being happy. Royce looked at her. Why? Because it always feels like something's waiting to take it away. He didn't argue, just nodded. Then let's be scared together, he said softly. And still choose it anyway. She looked down at her glass, then back at him. For the first time, she let herself believe, really believe, that she could have this. Not instead of the pain, but with it. Right there, side by side. It started with a letter, not an email, not a message or a phone call. A real letter folded neatly inside a pale blue envelope with Marla's name written in blocky, careful handwriting. She found it tucked between the pages of her journal that morning, left without a word. Inside it read, "You showed me I didn't have to be invisible anymore. Thank you for carrying the weight until I could stand again." There was no signature. Marla sat at the diner's corner booth long after the rush had ended, that letter in her lap, her fingers smoothing its creases again and again. The words weren't grand, but they undid something inside her. A knot that had sat just below her ribcage for years, pulling tight every time someone tried to reach in. She looked up as Royce walked in. He didn't wave or smile. He just moved straight toward her like he already knew something was different. "You okay?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from her. She handed him the letter. He read it, then looked up. "Do you know who wrote it?" "No," she said. "But it doesn't matter." He nodded. "How do you feel?" Marla let out a slow breath. "Like maybe I've been holding something too tightly. Like I can finally let it go." They sat in quiet for a moment. Comfortable now. Familiar. Then Royce reached into his jacket and pulled out a small rectangular card, thick paper gold embossed lettering. He set it in front of her without saying a word. Marla glanced down. It was an invitation. Veterans Impact Gala, Charleston, SC, honoring those who lead by example. Her name was printed beneath the logo. Keynote speaker, Marla Jennings. She froze. Her throat tightened. I know," Royce said. "I submitted your name. They accepted. You don't have to say yes." Marla looked at the card like it might burn her fingers. "I'm not that person." "Yes," he said gently. "You are. You just haven't seen her yet." Her eyes flicked up. "What if I mess it up?" "You won't." "What if I can't speak when I get up there?" He smiled. "Then I'll be in the front row, not blinking until you find your words." That stopped her. Something in the way he said it, so steady, so sure, it anchored her. She picked up the card and turned it over. The date was just 2 weeks away. "I need to think," she whispered. Royce nodded. "Of course." Later that night, she found herself walking through Forsyth Park alone. The sky was painted in soft strokes of lavender and gold. Spanish moss moved like whispers in the trees above her. She sat on a bench and closed her eyes. Years ago, she'd made peace with a small life, a quiet one. She'd chosen invisibility because it felt safe, because being seen meant being questioned, being judged, being known. And now she was standing at the edge of something vast, something terrifying, and something deeply, deeply right. The next day she sat down at the kitchen table with Walter. He was polishing his glasses, a habit she'd come to recognize meant he was thinking hard about something. "I'm going to Charleston," she said. He looked up, squinting slightly. "To speak?" She nodded. Walter gave the smallest smile. "Took you long enough?" Marla raised an eyebrow. "You knew I would, I hoped," he said. "But you're still full of surprises." She hesitated. "Do you think it's too much?" Walter set his glasses down and looked her dead in the eye. "No, it's not enough." That made her laugh. A short, real laugh. "I'll take that as a blessing." 2 weeks later, Charleston greeted her with salt air and warm wind. Royce met her outside the hotel carrying 2 coffees and a look that was half excitement, half tenderness. "You look like you're going to a war zone," he joked gently. "I feel like I am." He offered her the coffee. "You're walking into a room full of people who already respect you." All you have to do is let them meet you." That night, the gala hall shimmered with light. Dozens of round tables, tall floral centerpieces, and rows of seats facing the stage. Marla stood behind the curtain hands, cold despite the heat of the room. The event coordinator whispered something to her. She didn't hear it. She only heard her own breath. And then she walked out. The spotlight found her. Her boots clicked against the floor. The microphone waited. She stood behind it. Still. The room hushed. She looked out, faces waiting, watching. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Then her eyes found Royce. He didn't wave. He didn't mouth anything. He just sat there, unmoving, unblinking, fully present. And suddenly she remembered the bench by the river, the patch in her pocket, the letter with no name. She took a breath. "My name is Marla Jennings," she said. "I'm a waitress. I'm a veteran. I have scars that people stare at, and a story most people don't ask about." She paused. The silence stretched. No one moved. I used to think surviving was the end of the story, but it wasn't. It was just the beginning. And as her voice carried through the room, steady and sure, she felt something inside her settle. Not because the fear was gone, but because she was doing it anyway. The applause didn't hit all at once. It built slow, thoughtful, like people were still catching up to what they'd just heard. But once it began, it spread through the ballroom like warmth, a rising tide of something deeper than approval, recognition, respect. Marla didn't move. She stood at the podium, her hands still resting lightly on the edges, her heart thudding in a steady, grounded rhythm. For a moment, all she could do was breathe. Not to stay calm, but to take it in, to feel it. Then she looked up past the lights, past the blurred faces, and found Royce again. He was standing now, hands together, not smiling wide, just watching her like he'd known all along this was where she'd land. Not as a guest, not as a shadow, but as herself. She stepped away from the microphone, walked off stage, each step slow and deliberate. Like she wasn't just leaving a speech, but something she'd been carrying for too long. Outside, the air had turned cool. The city hummed softly in the background. Car tires on wet streets. Laughter down the block. A saxophone playing something old and aching from a rooftop bar nearby. Royce met her just outside the hall. He didn't say anything, just looked at her for a long beat, then held out his hand. She took it. They walked a few blocks without speaking, his thumb brushing over her knuckles like a metronome, steady, quiet, present. Finally, she stopped. They were at the edge of a small pedestrian bridge overlooking the water. Below, the river shimmered with city light. She turned to him. "I used to hate the sound of applause," she said. Royce tilted his head. "Why, it always felt like it belonged to someone else. Like it meant I was playing a role well enough for people to forget what's underneath." And now she smiled. "Now I think it means they finally saw what was always there." Royce's expression softened. "That's what happens when you stop hiding." Marla leaned against the railing, staring out at the ripples in the water. "I didn't realize how much I'd closed myself off, even from the parts of me that still wanted to grow." He stepped beside her. "It's scary to open back up. It's terrifying. But you did it anyway." She nodded. "Because I finally had someone who didn't ask me to change, just invited me to stay." Royce was quiet for a moment. Then, "So what happens now?" Marla looked over at him. "I go home," she said. "Back to the diner, back to the early mornings, and the worn-out booths and the smell of burnt toast and overbrewed coffee." Royce grinned. "Sounds terrible." "It's perfect," she said softly. It's mine. And me. She took a breath, reached into her pocket, pulled out the patch again, the one she'd held onto like a life raft for years. She turned it over in her hand once, twice, then placed it gently into his. I don't need to carry this alone anymore. His throat bobbed. You sure? She nodded. You were never trying to fix me. That's why I trust you. He looked down at the patch, his hand closing around it like a promise. Then he leaned closer, voice low. Does that mean I get to stick around? Marla smiled. I'm not asking for promises, she said. I'm asking for presence. I can do that. And patience. He nodded. Already there. She reached for his hand again, holding it without needing to be held back. They stayed there side by side in the hush of the evening. The breeze tugged at the hem of her jacket. The river moved without hurry. And the city, loud and quiet, all at once kept breathing around them. She didn't need a grand ending, because this wasn't one. This was the middle. A real one, with people, with struggle, with healing, with mornings that started too early, and coffee that never tasted quite right, and stories that didn't need to be polished to be powerful. This was what it looked like to live after the battle. Not to erase the scars, but to carry them differently, to say I was there, and I'm still here, and that matters. Marla turned to Royce, her voice soft but steady. Let's go home. And together they did.